Well, Democrats say that the latest gun law that they signed impacting the firearms industry with potential civil liability is to combat violent crime and what they call gun violence. But people responding to that, not just in court, but here on these airwaves, that's not necessarily going to be the ultimate outcome of this. And the latest law signed on Saturday on the heels of the Illinois Supreme Court upholding the state's gun and magazine ban, House Bill 218, it ultimately allows for the state and independent individuals to sue the firearms industry, either for creating a less safe public, allegedly, or for advertising to children, or for paramilitary or militia activity that would be deemed unlawful. So we've got now the lawsuit that was filed on Monday. Yesterday, a judge was randomly assigned to the case, so that is moving forward. The argument's being made that not only violates the First Amendment right of free speech, it also violates the Second Amendment right, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, but it also violates the Protecting Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, a federal law that essentially says you can't challenge an industry member for a protected class of tools like firearms, because, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's clearly spelled out in the Second Amendment. So we'll read a little bit of the lawsuit coming up here in a moment, but I want to revisit just some of what we haven't heard yet on the air from the Democrats who advanced this, including State Representative Jennifer Gahn-Gershowitz. You'll also hear from Senate President Don Harmon, but we start with Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul, who was one of the forces behind this, pushing for the gun and magazine ban. He's defending that in court, but he also pushed for this particular law that was signed on Saturday that allows for litigation against the firearms industry.
The legislation also clarifies that in addition to these provisions, the general prohibitions under the Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Practices Act apply to gun industry members like they do to every other business. We know that no area of our state is immune from gun violence. Our police officers throughout the state work hard and put their lives on the line to fight gun violence, but they cannot do it alone. Today, I'm grateful to the General Assembly and to our great governor for putting forth and approving this law. As Attorney General, I will continue my commitment to combat gun violence using all tools available, protecting public safety, and holding wrongdoers accountable. And Governor, this law will allow me to do so.
And today we take another step forward to collectively say enough is enough. Someone has to push back on the mayhem that would place a higher value on guns than children and act like it's okay. It's not okay.
Gun violence is not something that we should accept as a lamentable but normal cost of living in a free society. Manufacturers have made billions, and too many families have paid the price. Our children deserve to feel safe. They deserve to feel safe and free from a mass shooter in their classrooms or on their playgrounds or in their streets. It is long past time to hold gun manufacturers accountable just like every other manufacturer.
So then again, you've got the governor signing the measure on Saturday, literally a day after the state Supreme Court upheld his gun and magazine ban. So what's some of the response here? Of course, you heard a lot of the talk saying that it's needed to combat what they call gun violence. Others would see it just as violent crime. But you've got the Democrats saying we need this. This is a tool that they're going to use to try to combat crime. But some of the response on the flip side is that's not going to be necessarily the case here. State Senator Neil Anderson, we talked with yesterday. He shared this when it comes to his thoughts on whether or not this is actually going to combat crime. Here's Senator Anderson.
No, it doesn't do anything at all because the people doing all the crime in Chicago, for the most part, are not law-abiding citizens. They don't have a FOID card. They don't go through a background check when they purchase a firearm. And the hypocrisy is that most of the crimes committed in Chicago, most of the murders with firearms, are firearms that they're not even trying to ban. Most of them are done with .22 caliber rounds that would still be legal under this so-called assault weapons ban. So this is just a media headline. This is trying to solidify the far left base, and moving forward, it's just not going to work.
So, Senator Anderson, not seeing how the gun laws that they're passing to limit law-abiding citizens' ability to own certain types of firearms is going to curb violent crime. Something it could do, the most recent law signed that's now challenged in federal court, about the gun manufacturers or those in the firearms industry, allowing civil lawsuits against them. That's going to lead to a bevy of lawsuits, as we talked with U.S. Law Shield's Kirk Evans yesterday. Here's what he had to say when talking about this particular bill.
I think New Jersey may have been the first to pass this, but what they've done is basically made it much more easy to file suit against anyone in the firearms industry, and then made it extremely vague. They have these good practices policies and, reasonable measures and things like that, made it very, very vague. And so we're good. This one's, it may seem like we've got a lot of challenges on the assault weapons ban. This one, I think, is going to go on forever because we're going to have, individual lawsuits, one person versus another, that can go on for years, and then those will go up on appeal to the intermediate courts, and then those will go to either the state Supreme Court or the federal court, and those will just be on one-off individual one-on-one cases where we get rulings. Those could occur all across the state of Illinois and in the federal courts too. So I think this one's going to go on forever before we have any kind of final idea what stands and what doesn't.
And again, we do have that federal lawsuit, and we'll take a look at that. But I also want to take some of your phone calls at 217-629-7970. If you're up this early and you want to sound off, let's hear it. 217-629-7970. All right, let's open up the phone lines. Get your calls at 217-629-7970. That's the phone number, and a caller patiently standing by through the commercial break. Good morning. You're on WMAY. What's up?
Yeah, Greg. I mean, Pritzker keeps talking about gun violence, but to me, they keep ignoring the elephant in the room. To me, it's more of a race violence issue if you look at it. I mean, if you look at FBI statistics, a little over 60% of those arrested for homicide are black. A little over 30% are Hispanic. And only 5% are white and Asian combined.
And listen, there's a lot of different types of reasons behind that, socioeconomic reasons. You've got the issues of education and healthcare and jobs, all compounding this, and it looks like it's really in some dense urban areas where the higher rates of such violence occurs, and that's a major problem. How do you see any of these laws that the governor's passing and enacting? Do they address this at all?
They don't, and that's the problem. And until they address that fact, I mean, the reasons you gave, let's say those are all correct. And I won't argue that. But unless you do something to fix that problem, you're not going to fix the problem of people being killed by guns.
Well, and listen, I know that there's also a movement with the Illinois State Rifle Association to work with advocates on programs to help with socioeconomic conditions, to focus on education and healthcare programs as a means to try to get at what might be driving some of this violence. But it's when you look at these statistics, it's hard to not see some of the glaring things in there. But again, how do we go about addressing that? Is it to pass a ban on semi-automatic weapons, which there's an argument that when this thing is enforced, ultimately, you're going to have a disproportionate amount of minority groups impacted by this. The FOID card, for instance, you're going to have a disproportionate amount of minority groups impacted by the enforcement of the FOID card law. And then you stack on other things like this firearms manufacturer's liability law that the governor signed on Saturday, which is really what we're focused on here right now. But let's take a look at some of what the National Shooting Sports Foundation had to say about the law when they filed this lawsuit on Monday. And again, a federal judge has been assigned in the Southern District of Illinois to hear this case. So here's some of what they had to say in their brief. Just partly, they said none of the law is consistent with the Constitution. The First Amendment prohibits states from punishing wide swaths of truthful speech about lawful products, even if the products are dangerous or the speech is unpopular. They go on to say that the Second Amendment protects commerce in arms. Numerous constitutional provisions prohibit states from regulating conduct that takes place wholly beyond their borders, even when the commerce has effects within the state. And the Due Process Clause prohibits states from punishing one private party for the conduct of another. So really, you see there some of their arguments are that this is going beyond the Constitution. It's a violation of not just Second Amendment, but free speech as well, but also some of the Commerce Clause and the Due Process Clause. But then you go further on, and it talks about how you've got this issue of the Protect Lawful Commerce in Arms Act and how this violates that. They further say that Illinois is now trying to resurrect the very kinds of lawsuits that PLACA was enacted to eliminate. Under House Bill 218, state officials and private parties may bring civil actions against licensed manufacturers and sellers of firearms, ammunition, and related products for damages and other relief resulting from the criminal use of a firearm by a third party. HB 218, therefore, falls squarely within the express preemption provision of PLACA. Now, a separate lawsuit altogether could provide a little bit of insight in how this thing's going to play out in the federal courts, because there's another law that the governor signed that has been put on hold while the challenge in federal court continues. That's the law that allows the states to go after crisis pregnancy centers for allegations of deceptive practices. And that's another law that Attorney General Kwame Raoul spearheaded in the legislature, getting it through. And he's ultimately not allowed now to enforce that because a federal judge, after the various groups sued, a federal judge said this is a, quote, stupid law that is, quote, very likely unconstitutional because it violates free speech. So could that be an indication of what may happen in the Southern District of Illinois when it comes to this particular law, allowing for civil liability lawsuits against the firearms industry for making the communities less safe, allegedly, or for how they advertise, be it, a zombie hunt to have kids learn how to shoot firearms, or be it, an image of a person holding an AR-15 while wearing some kind of fatigues of sorts out in the woods with like a goggle or something. I mean, does that constitute paramilitary or militia activity? So you can see where the vagueness of these things really come into question. And you've got the Democrats who advance this saying they need this because it's going to, they claim, help with combating what they call gun violence. But again, State Senator Neil Anderson yesterday, when we chatted with him, he said that that's just not the case. It's not likely going to curb violent crime.
No, it doesn't do anything at all because, the people doing all the crime in Chicago, for the most part, are not law-abiding citizens. They don't have a FOID card. They don't go through a background check when they purchase a firearm. And the hypocrisy is that most of the crimes committed in Chicago, most of the murders with firearms, are firearms that they're not even trying to ban. Most of them are done with .22 caliber rounds that would still be legal under this so-called assault weapons ban. So this is just a media headline. This is trying to solidify the far left base, and moving forward, it's just not going to work.
So again, we'll watch how this particular lawsuit continues, challenging the firearms industry liability law that the governor signed, but we're also still tracking what's going on in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals with Illinois' gun and magazine ban being challenged there. We did review yesterday, and if you missed that, be sure to go check the video out. You had some filings from plaintiffs and the defendants, ultimately highlighting a note for judges to review the Hawaii case, where a federal judge said that butterfly knife bans are unconstitutional. So the plaintiffs in Illinois' Seventh Circuit Appeals Court case asking them to look at that, while you had the defense in the states and the county and the city all pushing back and saying, no, this, don't look at that. So that's just the latest in the gun and magazine ban challenge in the Seventh Circuit. We still don't know when they're going to issue a ruling on that, so we'll be watching that very closely. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. And, of course, every morning we do it here, live and local, 6 to 9, here with Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. Programming notes. I'm going to be off all next week. So we'll have a bunch of best ofs on the air, and I may put together some supercuts for the YouTube channel as well to kind of take a look back at some of the stuff that we've covered over these many weeks. But I'm looking forward to taking a full week off and just completely unplug as best as I can, and aiming to do that, of course, after the conclusion of the Illinois State